All right, welcome back to the supplementary elections. We're about to get finality to some of those states concerned in this supplementary election. We've seen that of Plateau earlier in the day, but at the moment, the collation has been done in Sokoto. They're just waiting to transfer all of those results before they finally announce it. But let's get now to Benson Olugbo, who is the Executive Director, Clean Foundation. He joins us from our studios in Abuja. Good. Okay. Didn't get that clearly, but Mr. Olugbo, are you there at the moment? Okay. Yeah. Thank you for joining us today. So, could you give us your impression of what you've seen play out so far?
Good morning, and thank you for having me. I guess what we can say is that relatively the election yesterday was, if you can say, relatively peaceful to an extent. In some of the states, of course, in terms of presence of INEC officials, we realized that they came early. And also the security agencies and in the polling units, in some of the polling units where we had our observers, they also actually came there early in the day. But beyond that, of course, I'm sure you are aware that in some of the polling units, especially in Kano State and Benue State, there were violent issues that occurred, and we're also aware that some people died. We've not confirmed all the stories, but we know that in Benue and Kano State, there were reported fatalities. So for us, it's not the best of elections we should have, because ordinarily these are supposed to be supplementary elections, and the numbers are few, and we expected a better performance than what we had. And taking into consideration that the reruns were actually as a result of electoral infractions in the previous elections, one begins to wonder why should we still go on in a supplementary election, and there will be violence. People will still be killed. Party thugs will have a free rein, kidnapping people, snatching ballot boxes, preventing people from voting. So it's really a call for duty for everybody. Yeah, Mr. And I think it is important that we call out.
Yeah, let me jump in and ask you, so you could also add to this while you're responding to what you're about to say. In Kano, for instance, you know, while we had the presidential election, there wasn't that kind of report of violence. But even when you had the first ballots for the governorship elections, there wasn't that much report of violence. But now, on the second ballot, we see all kinds of images, pictures coming through from different places about the violence, you know, that took place in Kano State. And you do remember that there's still the Commissioner of Police. And then the police had deployments for AIGs, DIGs in Kano State. So you tend to wonder what exactly that the least you expected was security was going to be really tight, such that there will be no violence. But where do you think they missed it?
I think from our experience, supplementary elections, the reruns, have actually been not the best of what we can do. And the reasons are very, very straightforward. Let me take you back. In some of the threat assessments we did, Clean Foundation, we did 3 threat assessments before the election in April, in December, and in January. And we realized that there are key drivers of violence. The issue of hate speech, the issue of vote trading, the issue of activities of political parties and party thugs. We all know that the election is local. And in Nigeria, it becomes higher when the result is already there, with people already know some of the results. So you just need either to add or reduce the numbers. And that is actually why there's a lot of violence. Because as they normally say, the die is already cast. You know who will win if some numbers are added or some numbers are reduced. And that is exactly what is playing out in Kano. Politics is local, and it's unfortunate that at this stage of our election, that politicians are making things difficult even for voters to come out and vote. We had instances in Kano State where people were prevented from voting, and they were literally threatened if they vote for a particular political party. In some places, ballot boxes were snatched. So it all goes back to the desperation of politicians, the winner-takes-all syndrome, the fact that we must win by all means possible.
Mr. Lugo, if you don't mind me butting in, how do we contend what you just said now about the political class playing the role that you say they are playing now, despite the fact that as at 6 p.m. yesterday, your organization published this, noted that the highest number of deployment of security, the second highest number of security personnel, deployed for these elections went to Kano. On the one hand is the security of the lives and property of the voter. On the other side is the security of the lives and property of the election management, members of the election management board, or representatives of INEC in this case. So how do we marry this case? We knew this was going to happen. So how come we weren't able to mitigate this risk?
Well, I think the problem is that there are factors that are playing out here. And I think is something that the INEC, Independent National Electoral Commission, and the security agencies will have to actually explain to us what really went wrong. So from our own assessment, we realized that Bauchi had the highest number of security deployments, followed by Kano. Unfortunately, despite that high deployments of security agents, some of the polling units witnessed unprecedented violence. And we actually want to condemn that. But the reality also is that what we are still trying to find out is why will you have such a high number of security personnel deployed at different places, and then you still have this violence that is taking place. Unlike, if you take, for instance, what may have happened during the governorship elections and also what may have happened during the presidential election. And that brings me to the argument I was earlier making on that politics is local, and that politicians at this point in whatever we are doing, they are very desperate and they are ready to do anything. So the fact that a high number of security personnel was deployed does not really explain why we still have we still had the level of violence we had.
Okay, let me bring an argument. Let me bring on an argument, Mr. Olugo. Here, you said something now that everyone says. That's the fact that politics is local. Just yesterday, we were having a conversation here, and someone was also suggesting, what if we go for native intelligence in this case, perhaps also suggesting that if politics is local, then security should be local. What's your take on that?
Well, that is the argument that has been made about the reform of the Nigerian police force. And of course, I'm sure you are aware that there is currently a bill before the National Assembly to amend the Police Act. You will agree with me that the Police Act we are still operating till date is that was actually bequeathed to us by the colonial masters in 1943. And as we speak in 2019, there has not been any effective review of the Police Act and the 420 regulations that go with the Police Act. I think it is important that we go through that process of review. There are arguments for and against state police. I wouldn't want to go into whether we need state police or whether we don't need state police. What I think is that we need a Nigerian police force that is accountable, that is transparent, and that meets the yearnings and aspirations of Nigerians. Whether we go for full-blown state police is one thing. Whether we go for a hybrid that we already have is another thing. There are both merits and demerits in going either for state police or going for hybrid that we already have. There are advantages and disadvantages in them. But I guess the primary thing is that we need a police force that is both accountable, that is both transparent, and that meets the yearnings of the Nigerian people. And from what we saw in Kano State, I think we still need to interrogate once again our security architecture. It's not only the police, it's the whole system. The whole system needs a review. And I think that's also why we are calling that there is a need for review of the electoral process that just took place in 2019. Because if we don't do that, we are setting a stage for that derogation from the principles I've already laid down in previous elections. If we are moving towards 2023 and we're not able to sit down and ask ourselves, where did the rest start beating us in the 2019 general election?
Mr. Lugo, you also talked about the political class and the role they have played in this election. Now, that's rather troubling, seeing that we knew that this was going to happen. That's by the way. What do we need to do now to make political practice more appealing to those who don't like the kind of situation or system that we're running politically now? What do we do to clean it up?
Electoral reform is key. And I think we have low-hanging fruits that we need to deal with as soon as possible. And my own take is that the 8th Assembly has a responsibility, actually. There is a bill that was passed by the National Assembly, which the President refused assent. One of the reasons that the President gave is that it was very close to the elections, and there were some issues he wasn't comfortable with, which I'm sure the National Assembly, the 8th National Assembly that will end before the new administration in May 29, can actually work and send it back to the President for his signature. I think that will be a basis of discussions on further review of the Electoral Act. I think we also need to take another look at the Uweye's report, the Electoral Reform Report of 2008. It contains key recommendations after the 2007 election, which, of course, the former President, Lecture Adua, actually also considered that there were problems and set up the committee. And the committee came up with different recommendations, which still date. We have found it very difficult to critically look at that report and adopt it to the extent possible. So one, the bill that is currently before the National Assembly, I think it is important that the President sign it into law as part of his legacy moving forward. Secondly, we need to look at that Uweye's report again. There is the issue of Electoral Offenses Commission. I think it's important that that Electoral Offenses Commission should come on board because what we are seeing is impunity upon impunity, where individuals who do things that are not supposed to do, they go away with it. And what then happens is that individuals now get that unfortunate authority to say if they've done this and nothing happened to them, then I can actually do more of it and nothing will happen. We need to start punishing offenders. Also, that takes me to the other third issue. The police told us during the presidential election that they had arrested 323 electoral offenders and about 700 in the governorship. Those individuals who have been arrested need to actually be investigated and prosecuted in our courts. And those who are found guilty should be punished to the extent possible. We have allowed them for a long time, and I think we have to start looking critically at the issue of electoral violence. The other issue is that we need to look closely at our political parties. Yes, the Electoral Act, the Constitution is very clear on how to form a political party. But we've realized that some of these political parties are actually not helping the electoral process. Because I was listening last night, about 90% of the parties were actually getting 0, 0, 0, 0. It's the beauty of democracy, but we have to agree that the number of political parties we have now may not be in the interest of democracy in Nigeria. So there is need to prune down. That will be by effect of the law and not just INEC doing that. Thirdly is that it is important that we may have to make politics less lucrative. Because one of the problems that we are having in Nigeria is the high level of money involved in politics. Politics is the easiest way of becoming rich in Nigeria. And that is why everybody wants to fight with all the blood in his body, or the blood in her body, to win elections. And that is why people are ready to kill. People are ready to unleash thugs. People are ready to unleash people who are heavily armed on helpless citizens who just came out to vote. So, unfortunately, the fact that we have a syndrome of winner takes it all makes it difficult for politicians not to fail for debates of winning by all means. So we need to interrogate again, what is service in Nigeria? People who want to serve us, people who are going into politics, why are they going into politics? Is it for service that people are being killed? Is it for service that people are being maimed? Is it for service that people are being unleashed on innocent and helpless Nigerians? why is it that every point in time that the citizens queue on the line to vote, people have the effrontery and the temerity to come and cut ballot box, and in some instances, kill people and maim them for life? We have to encourage and ask ourselves, all this, is it just for service, or there is something that meets the eye that is happening in the political class that they wouldn't just allow Nigerians to do what they are supposed to do under a democratic dispensation?
You know, when you talk about getting electoral offenses commission, you know, in that line of thought, to what extent can that invalidate or perhaps, for want of words, nullify or reduce the kind of influence states will have if, for instance, where they have state-sponsored violence or political thugs?
Yeah. What you will realize yesterday, even during the governorship election and even during the presidential election, is that nobody will just move from his house and go to a polling unit and cut away ballot box or injure an individual or carry gun without an incentive. And that incentive comes from political parties and politicians who want to win by all means. So when we start discussing the issue of crime, there are people who commit the crimes, there are those who abet crimes, there are those who are part of the conspiracy. So if you look at a chain of crime, if a political thug is arrested, there's every tendency that at a point in time, he should be able to say who is financing the thuggery or who, in one way or the other, may have contributed in the crime that was committed. So I am not saying that the legal framework we have now will not be able to deal with that. But the reality is that we have also seen that, of course, we have the ordinary courts, but with the establishment of the ICPC and the EFCC, we have seen that, to an extent, there has been a determined effort to deal with the issue of corruption, even though that is a discussion for another day. If we have a commission that is dedicated to electoral offenses, it will dig deep, it will investigate, it will actually have a trail of activities of political thuggery, of violence, and begin to move into the individuals who sponsor these crimes, the individuals who are responsible, and individuals who are actually behind the scene pulling the strings. And I think that, to an extent, will reduce the political violence we have in Nigeria. Because it seems currently we are treating political violence and electoral violence with kid gloves. We really need to nail down, drill down on the issue of violence on elections, because it is unacceptable. It does not bode well for our democracy, and it is not in the best interest of the country that political thugs will take over our electoral process.
You know, for those who argue that, you know, we need to demonstrate a lot in terms of our intention to actually, you know, double down or at least demonstrate a lot of intent in prosecution and dealing with several cases, including electoral offenses. When they say regular courts, for instance, in legal cases, a state can enter a nollie in a particular matter. It could be criminal or whichever. And they think that some states have not actually used that to the advantage of the society, but to the detriment of society and to the advantage of their supporters. So is that a lacuna for those who think that, for instance, that's a clear case where something, we need to take that away and demonstrate our intention to ensure that the law catches up with any and everyone who flouts the law?
Yeah, every law has its own advantages and has the reason why it is made. The Constitution, of course, provides for the issue of nolli prosequi, and it's for reasons that those provisions are in those laws. There are reasons why they are there, and if you go to climes that are a little developed, you will also see that they apply caution before they use the issues of nolli prosequi. Every law is also subject to abuse, and I think we have to consider that. And the reality also is that there have been instances where some individuals have been left off the hook for the mere reason that they are affiliated to one political party or the other. I will not say that because of that we should do away with such provisions, because there are benefits of having such provisions in the law. What needs to be regulated is the way and means those no-case submissions or nulli prosequi are utilized in our courts. There is the possibility of abuse, but I think also it is important that we look closely at how the processes go on. And that is why I think we need to do further emphasis on having an Electoral Offences Commission, because that Electoral Offences Commission, for me, will have the legal enablement to actually make it a federal crime, and that, to an extent, now removes the opportunities that the attorney generals of the states will have to influence or interrogate whatever is happening in those courts. And also the fact that it's now an independent body will mean that, of course, you have professionals who will be dedicated to that. I know, and I also consider there will likely be problems with that. But the fact that this issue has been on the front burner for a long time, I think it is important that we experiment with it. Because also we are beginning to realize that a lot of Nigerians are actually losing faith in our democratic system. It seems we are allowing political thugs and politicians are having a field day in making our democracy unworkable. So I think there is need for drastic measures. I think there is need for us to take the bull by the horns. I think there is need for us to confront the realities that our democracy will not grow, will not evolve, if you allow political thuggery to be the order of the day. And I know that we have the will to do that. All we are looking for is that political will for those who are in power to pull the necessary strings to make sure that these things come to be.
All right, we'll go to break, but we'll come back and explore more possible solutions to all that is going wrong with our elections. That's in a moment. Stay with us.